Awesome. Well, thank you, participants and panelists. We've got Joel from the Tomo Bouldering Club in Portland, Oregon. If you just joined us as a participant, little point of order, people are kind of sharing their business and where they're from. I'll try to give you all shout outs as we start up. Sonia, business student at PCC and small business owner of Cabin Fever Pacific Northwest. Sonia, were you there when I did the presentation in class? And we've got Darren Rutledge. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong, with Klamath Idea. We support entrepreneurs and startups and connect them to great resources such as this webinar. Thank you, Darren, for being an advocate. And Zoe's building my online graphic design business in San Francisco. That's rad. That's where I was born and grew up. That's amazing. So I'll go ahead and do the intro, and then I'm going to hand it over to Chloe. My name's John Beebe. I am the business coach at Craft3, and I'm part of the business services team with my partner, Aldo Medina, who's on the call as well. He's the program director. And this is the third in the series, the webinar series, and we're so excited you guys are here. We came up with this idea of really just having these kind of evergreen resources with amazing professionals like Chloe and like some of the others that we've had in the past for this webinar series that you guys are attending now, which is awesome. And that'll also kind of live on our website and our YouTube channel as ongoing resources for small business owners and just people that are interested in different aspects of their business. This is going to be featuring Chloe Steinhoff-Smith, who is a branding strategist. She has her own brand, and this presentation is just awesome. Aldo and I got to sit in on it, and I'm a small business owner, and I learned a ton, even when we were just walking through it. So I know there's going to be some really good takeaways during it. We will have 2 Q&A breaks. And this entire thing is being curated by our amazing marketing team, in particular, Jennifer Peterson. So a huge round of applause for her for helping facilitate this and put this on. And with that, I will hand it over to Chloe, and then I will moderate the question and answer period. Aldo is going to be keeping an eye on the chat and letting me know what questions pop up. So feel free to put those in the chat. And we'll have 2 of those. So we'll have ones in the middle. There he is. Have ones in the middle, and then we'll have ones at the end. And with that, Chloe, the floor is yours.
Thanks, John. My name's Chloe. I specialize in branding and packaging for CPG companies, but I have a lot of experience with lots of different types of businesses. So we're going to talk about branding for you guys. First, we'll just discuss what I mean when I'm talking about branding. People describe it in a lot of different ways, but essentially there are 3 pillars that make up a brand. There's the strategy, which is who you are and why you exist, and basically kind of why you're doing everything and what makes your customers want to come to you. There's the verbal identity, which is how you communicate with your audience, the language and tone that you use. And then there's the visual identity, which is what a lot of people think of as branding, which is how it looks out there in the world. So logo, colors, type, etc. This is a quote that I like about the importance of branding. I'll just read it. Of all the things that your company owns, brands are by far and away the most important and the toughest. Founders die, factories burn down, machinery wears out, inventories get depleted, technology becomes obsolete. Brand loyalty is the only sound foundation on which business leaders can build enduring, profitable growth. So I know it's a little intense, but basically it means that if you build your brand based on your story and your values and these kind of intangible things, rather than being tied to a location or a product or a specific person, it can endure as your brand grows and changes, as time goes on, as you add offerings, etc. So it's really important. Your brand is really how you create trust and signify legitimacy. It's how you differentiate yourself. It's how you build equity in the brand, and it's how you create loyal customers. This is an example that I like to use. So we all like to think that our amazing product is going to be enough to bring people in and make people want to use it. And, you know, we think you've probably poured a lot of work into whatever your product or service is. And you think that that should be enough to make people want to buy it. But really, that's not how we make those kinds of decisions. We make decisions about what we buy based on what we think it means about us, how it makes us feel, etc. I think that bottled water is a really good example of that because it's all water. You know, maybe there are some slight differences, but how different can it really be? You might know some information about these brands from living in the world, but even without that knowledge, you will make intuitive judgments just from looking at them. So yeah, take a minute with this lineup and try to think about which one, based on just what you're seeing here, which one is most expensive, which one is most sustainable, which one is the best value, which one would appeal to your parents versus your kids. If you had this lineup in front of you and they were being given away for free, which one would you choose, and which one would you choose at the grocery store where you had to pay for it? I've arranged these roughly in order of price based on my own kind of assumptions, but I do know that this Antipodes water on the left is about 10 times more expensive than the Crystal Geyser one on the right. The Antipodes water claims that it comes from this aquifer that's 300 meters below the ground in New Zealand, and it makes it purer than other water. But really, if you have this selection in front of you, even if it was the same water in this Crystal Geyser bottle and it came from the same place, you're not going to pick up that crinkly plastic water bottle if this is the selection in front of you. So no matter what's in there, the branding and packaging is really what's gonna want to make you pick it up. Obviously, the packaging design of all of these is a very important piece. And this is an example of a touch point. And that's basically anywhere that people will be interacting with your brand in some way. So essentially, this is kind of the scope of like the brand and then how it is out there in the world. And these are all really important pieces in the success of your business. So you have the what, which is probably what you are most intimately familiar with, what you've spent the most time with, and that's your product or service. And then you have the brand strategy piece of the branding, which is the why, again, like who you are and why you exist. And then the who is how you're presenting and out in the world, how you're talking and how you look. And then the how are the ways that all of these things are expressed out there in the world, depending on the type of business that you have. You'll have different touch points and some will be more important than others. And some elements of the branding will be more important depending on what type of business you are. But either way, all of these things are important to express the brand and be successful. I'm going to give a real world example. This is one of my favorite clients, Cafe Zamora. The founder, Hector, owns a coffee farm in Guatemala, in his home country of Guatemala, and he directly imports and roasts the beans here in Portland. And he opened up a shop here in 2019. The branding in a traditional sense was pretty minimal, but Hector gained a lot of momentum because he was usually there in person at the coffee shop, and he was really warm and enthusiastic, and he could easily articulate the business's mission and get people on board. He works with other farmers as well as his farm in that same region in Guatemala. So he cuts out the middleman and allows those people, those coffee farmers, to make a real profit, which is really different than a lot of other coffee. So the brand is really heavily rooted in this story and in this location. The coffee shop replaced one that was in the space before, so there were already customers that were ready to have a coffee shop there, and the coffee is legitimately really good. So, you know, I went from like roasting my own coffee at home to drinking this coffee pretty much exclusively. So it's a good product. He's definitely got the what, and he's got a lot of the why. But then, of course, COVID happened in 2020, less than a year after he had opened, and the coffee shop was forced to close. And that avenue, which was his main avenue for sales, was totally cut off. One of the only industries that was doing better during COVID was grocery stores. So suddenly it was really crucial for Cafe Zamora to get their coffee beans onto retail shelves. But the key touch point for retailers is packaging design. And that relies really heavily on the verbal and visual identities, which he didn't really have yet, to communicate the story, to compel shoppers to choose it off of its shelf where it's among dozens of competitors. So their existing labels really do nothing to communicate that. Also, the first hurdle for a brand like this, before you can even get in front of shoppers, is to be accepted by a retail buyer. And they generally have pretty specific guidelines and really high standards. So I worked with Hector to create this branding and go through all of these pillars and really flesh all of them out. I won't go through all of this in too much detail, but basically we put together the elements of the brand strategy. We clearly defined his target market. We created this persona and defined what Cafe Zamora could offer her specifically that maybe other coffee could not. We worked on the verbal identity, so how we're going to communicate this amazing mission through the touch points, the kind of messaging that we wanted to use in the tone and how to talk to this target market. And then finally, we developed the visual identity, which is, again, logo, color palette, typography, and the types of imagery that were being used. And then we put all of that together in these touch points. So the first touch point, since we're, it was really important to get onto that retail shelf, was this packaging design. And this is a culmination of all of that work in building the brand. So we looked at their target markets and we thought, how can we inspire and motivate them the same way that Hector would in person when we're not in the room to tell a story? So we put that messaging front and center, and we featured this artwork from a Guatemalan artist. And we made this touch point that retailers could envision on their shelves. And it worked. So regional retailers like New Seasons and Market of Choice picked it up. And he started building revenue from those retail sales. Since the brand was really built on this story and not tied to a specific location or even really the specific amazing product that he had, it was really easy to stay consistent with other touch points like outdoor community-based events that he hosted in the space behind the coffee shop while we were still all social distancing. He was featured in publications like Eater and the Oregonian, and he did a lot of direct-to-consumer subscription sales, and he did a lot of partnerships with other businesses in the community. So this holistic approach and adaptability of the brand allowed Cafe Zamora to stay afloat during a crisis that was the downfall of so many other businesses, as we all know. Oops. And now Hector opened his cafe in a new location, and he's continuing to partner with a lot of other local businesses and actively participate in the community. And he's even launching new products and expanding his offerings. He has the same advantage that a lot of you probably have as a small business, which is that he's really intimately connected with the business. So it's easy for him to embody and express the brand in a really authentic way. And that is difficult for a lot of bigger companies with tons of stakeholders where you have to educate everyone about the brand. So yeah, this is where he is today, continuing that success. So what's the takeaway? Businesses fall short when they fail to align their touch points with their brand. So if you have that what piece, you have your product, and then you build your how just on the product without everything in between, you're failing to connect with your audience and define your differentiator and make a impact that will lead to long-term success. And a successful brand will allow you to retain loyal customers and clients even as your offering evolves. So even as Hector had to close the coffee shop and sell the coffee in different ways and figure out different revenue streams to support the business, that brand really was able to resonate and endure and grow throughout all of that. So yeah, this is question time. I think John is going to let me know what your questions are since I can't see you guys.
Yeah, I will give everybody a little bit of time to kind of absorb that and take a moment and sort of curate their questions or thoughts. Um, and I'll just offer my own input and takeaways on that. What a great way to integrate the idea of branding into your overall business strategy. One of the things that we do in our business coaching sessions with our clients and prospects is we work on their business plan, whether they have an existing business plan or whether they're going to start a business plan for their first time. And yeah, Ramsey's, yes, Ramsey, the recording itself will be available after we finish up on the website and our YouTube channel. So I can address that really quick. But so much of what Chloe just talked about was really just overarching business strategy in your business plan. The slide where she presented your ideal consumer and, what's the differentiator of Cafe Zamora? What's the differentiator of that brand? Those are questions that we ask in a collaborative sense with our clients all the time, and we talk about all the time with our clients. So this isn't just exclusively what's my logo. This is the branding strategy overall, and you could see the successes around that branding strategy with a brand that really resonates for pretty much all of us. So I'm going to just go ahead and be quiet for a second and leave the space open for questions or thoughts. And you can share them on the Q&A or you can share them on the chat, and Aldo will fire those over to me. And if I don't hear anything, I've got a couple myself. So
Tina asked a question. John, do you mind reading it?
let's see. I don't see it in the Q&A. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me get out of that really quick. I don't see it. Tina, could you, oh wait, hold on. When would you reevaluate your existing brand to revamp it? How would you, as a small business owner, know if my brand is not working? And that was from Tina. Thank you, Tina, for asking.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think we'll go into like building your brand and then when to invest, although I don't have something specific about rethinking. I think that if you've never thought about your branding, like if you've kind of just been, a lot of businesses will kind of just go along and do it piece by piece as they feel they need it. So maybe you'll kind of you'll be like, oh, I need a logo for this thing that's happening, so I'm just going to do that really quick, and then you'll build this touch point, and then you'll kind of like cobble together your branding as you go. So if that's been your approach so far, I would definitely try to formalize that and work with someone to make it really refined and easy to execute. If you have done that and it's not really working, I would maybe think about where the brand is misaligned with your offering, and then try to figure out maybe if you should be using different touch points. Like if you feel pretty strongly about your brand and you're not sure why it's not working, it could be because you haven't, a little piece of it is off. Like maybe you've not identified the right audience, or maybe you're not applying it to the right touch points. Maybe people aren't seeing it. Like you could go back to your market research and really look at like where your audience is hanging out and where they're shopping, and finding information and make sure that if your branding is all together, that it is reaching them there. A good time to reevaluate would be if your business has changed, like if your goals, like if the foundations of your business have really shifted and changed, then making sure that that is being updated in your strategy will be important too. Does that answer things, hopefully?
And I've got two more, so we've got some really good questions. So I've got one from Zoe, and that's, can you share a little bit about your design process and how you kept the essence of Hector's business in mind? Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. So I do have some stuff about the process, but in terms of the visual identity, a lot of that was learning Hector's story really well, hearing about his coffee farm, A lot of what was important to me was not being like gimmicky or like pulling this like Guatemalan imagery that I am not really familiar with, and like flattening it in this way. So I wanted to make sure to include this like custom artwork from an actual Guatemalan artist. And it was important for Hector that we didn't mimic these like indigenous patterns, because that's really not part of his culture. So he didn't want to capitalize on or exploit that. So just really understanding what the product is all about, and that strategy piece, and like what is really important for it to communicate. So we chose that Quetzal bird as the main symbol because of the symbolism in that culture, and because I think that it resonates with an American audience as well. So a lot of it is like finding that balance of retaining the essence of the brand and like why it exists, but also making it appealing to this target market. So it's really just about like research and strategy, and we went through a few rounds of that. And I made sure to get a lot of guidance from Hector about that, since he understands it better than anyone.
All right, I have two more questions. One I'll answer to give you a break to be able to, get some water, catch breath, whatever. You're doing awesome. So one is, Sonia, you asked if there's any sort of template to follow. Chloe's been kind enough to offer actually 2 takeaways that have a ton of content and a ton of really good questions that you can ask yourself as the business owner about your brand. And they kind of lead into one another, so they're really building on them, and you can just kind of do them at your own pace and have some good insight around that. So hopefully that'll be a good way for you to start as far as like a template and everything. And then this is the last question that we'll cover now, and we'll have time for questions at the end. Darren has a question. Are there any nuances in a branding strategy that differ based on whether your business provides services or sells products? Great question.
Yes. So, yeah, I think it really, that is a good question. Definitely, depending on the type of business that you have, parts of this will be more important. So if you're a service-based company, and you're a service-based small business, there's a good chance that you as a person are the driver behind your brand's success, because you'll be selling it directly. Like, you will be talking about it, you'll be presenting it. So the strategy piece and the verbal identity piece might be more important than your visual identity. So you can make choices about where you're investing your time and your money and your energy in those things, and really think about like which will be most valuable to you. I think that service-based companies can be more difficult to brand from a visual perspective, because there's a lot of just like conceptual information. It's not like a specific product. But as I said, like the visual identity is maybe has less weight in terms of the value to your success. So it's really just, and then a lot of it is also about which touch points you're using. So figuring out like where to invest in like putting your brand out into the world. I think it is still really important to invest in the branding, but like figuring out which parts are most valuable will definitely help you, and not like spending a bunch of money on stuff that you maybe don't quite need yet.
That's great. If you'd like to take us into the Darren says very helpful response, Chloe, thanks. So if you want to take it into the second half, that would be great.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I know someone asked about a template, and hopefully this section will be helpful to you. So I'm going to just take you through actually how you would build a brand. This is how I would be doing it if you were working with me. So you'll start with market research, and the takeaways that I have are about the market research and the big questions, which is the next part. This is something that generally business owners are really good at, because no one knows your business better than you. So by market research in this sense, I call this kind of soft data or like exploratory research, because it's not the type of hard numbers that you'll need for your business plan or to attract investors. It's more about getting a sense of like understanding and feeling familiar with your market. And a lot of people recommend for market research, like interviewing the people, and I actually think it's more valuable to do that later, because people don't have a lot of, they're not very accurate in their self-reflection of like why they're making buying decisions often. Like if you think about it, it's more intuitive. So looking at at like reports and stuff about how people are actually shopping, I think is more helpful. So you'll want to learn as much as possible first about your consumer. So what are the demographics of people who are actually buying stuff in your market? Where are they shopping? How much are they spending? What influences their decisions? What frustrates them about other products in your market? How do they find out about new brands, etc.? And you can just like start Googling stuff like, you know, beauty industry trends or like fitness consumer report, stuff like that, and just read reports and articles and then find the sources and look at the actual studies and just take in as much information as possible. And then you're going to learn about the landscape. So that's understanding the trends in your industry, how things are going. Is it quickly growing? What are the factors that affect the industry and the market? And then you're going to take a good look at your competitors and see what they're doing that's working and where they might be falling short. And finally, you want to look for gaps or areas of interest that aren't being addressed by your competitors, or what you can focus on that will make you stand out in that landscape. Next, you want to ask yourself these big questions. Some of this you can draw on your market research for, and other parts it's just about clarifying and explaining the things that you probably already know and feel really deeply as the founder of your business. And some of these might be assumptions that you'll need to come back to as you start to see what's working in the real world. And then you'll start to define the specific attributes of your brand by putting them somewhere in the middle of opposite spectrums. And these are the ones that I typically use. So where on the scale are you between classic and new, approachable versus authoritative, understated versus exuberant, masculine, feminine, necessity, luxury, fun, and serious, etc. It can also be helpful if there's a wide range of prices in your industry to figure out where you fall price-wise. You can also pick some of your competitors and place them on these scales as well, and that'll help you fine-tune the context and figure out where you belong. And then you'll use all of that research and information to start building your actual brand. So you'll start with the brand strategy. And I do have an example of another brand that I have built. So I can just go through it here. So you have the big idea, which is in 10 words or less. What is your business? Who are you? And then the core purpose, which is a brief statement that explains why you exist. The attributes, which is 4 to 6 words or phrases that describe your business and how they do that. And then defining these primary and secondary target markets. So it's describing their demographics, what they do for fun, what motivates their buying decision, what are they excited about, how they kind of fit into your market, and then identifying your unique value proposition for each of these personas. And then next you'll move into your verbal identity. So again, like how does your brand communicate? The voice is like, what is it like to talk to you, basically? Like what if your brand was a person, what kind of person would it be? Like how would it feel to talk to you? The tone, obviously it's the tone. What are some words that describe how you sound? Key messaging is like any points that you want to hit when you're doing copywriting or like on your touch points? What are some really important things that you want to express? And the narrative is the story behind your brand, and how you want to tell it and how you want to contextualize that story. And then banned terms versus terms you want to use instead. So for this Chef Ron's product, which is a vegan bone broth, essentially, we did a lot of research that told us that consumers in this industry are not, most of them are omnivorous. So they're eating both plant-based and, I don't know, animal-based products, and they're choosing these plant-based products because of how they taste and the variety to their diet, and not because of or like care about the environment, and not necessarily because of like weight loss concerns. And we also really wanted to stay away from this like diet culture language, because we want people to feel good about eating this. Like we want them to feel, we don't want them to be thinking about you know, their body and their weight. We want them to be thinking about like how good it feels to eat it, and all the good stuff that it's doing for them. So yeah, we kind of fine-tuned this language and make sure we're like staying away from these banned terms. Next, we moved into the visual identity, and I'll just go through that. So you have your logo. A good logo is simple, versatile, unique, and appropriate. Usually it has these two parts, like a symbol and then some text. It doesn't always have a symbol, especially like service-based businesses, like I said, where there's not this like concrete product. Often like a text-based logo will work better. But you know, you want to have components that are like reconfigurable for the context, so that no matter what the space is like, you have something that will fit there. And then you want to have versions that work in black and white. Yeah. And then you have the color palette. So you can do some research about color theory and stuff, but a lot of this is about like vibe and feelings. But you know, make sure you're picking colors that work well together and work well with what you're selling, but give yourself enough options to also be functional. So think about background versus foreground colors and stuff like that. And then typography. A lot of people think of this as the fonts used in the logo, but really you should think of this instead as like a standalone graphic element, and choose fonts that complement the logo instead of matching this. So you're thinking about the fonts that you'll be using in all of your touch points, like your website and your packaging. But I mean, as you'll see in the touch point section of this, I also have a lot of hand-drawn fonts in that, which is more of like a style element. So we can, which is like a later part of this. So when you put it all together, and then this also has like photography, style of graphics, and illustration. So we use these like kind of simple, colorful illustrations, and this like hearty, like, you know, food-based photography, and these like craft paper textures. And so when it all comes together, this is like a mood board of what the brand should feel like. And then we'll put that all together in your touch points. So refer back to your brand strategy and put yourself in your market's shoes, and make sure that the choices you're making will resonate with them. And then, so you'll put that all together. This is an example of the touch points for this brand. So you can see that I took from that style there to make some hand-drawn fonts, because the packaging is really more of like this graphic element. But then I did also use the fonts that we chose, like on the farmers market banner and this signage and postcards and sell sheets and stuff like that. Yeah, hopefully pretty straightforward and clear. So next, I want to talk about investing in your brand. I'm always a big advocate of hiring professionals to do what you can't do, especially when doing it yourself can cost you money or time, or cause damage. So you know, that's why I hire an accountant and a plumber and other service providers. So I do, you know, I recommend working with someone pretty early. The longer you take a DIY approach, the more you might have to backtrack and repeat work later. And in the meantime, you could be missing out on opportunities to connect with people who would help your brand grow because you don't have the right tools to express it. That being said, wait until you're ready. So I would wait until you're really clear about what you're selling and you have a concrete business plan and you know what your goals are for the business, because it sucks to have to go back and repeat work a few months down the line because you've made some big changes and the branding is no longer aligned with your business goals or your target market has changed, stuff like that. How much to invest? So a good way to think about it is, what is the value of good branding to your business? Your investment should be consistent with that value. So is the branding going to help you sell your product at Whole Foods, or is it going to like attract big fish to your service offering? And what is that worth to you? And what is the potential cost of going without it? And then, like I was saying before, spend where it makes sense. So take stock of your business's needs and invest more heavily in those areas. So if you're a consultant or a service-based business, and your brand is really about you, you could be investing more in that strategy and verbal identity. Whereas if you're selling a product, especially a retail product, and it has to stand out on a shelf, you'll want to budget more for that visual identity. And then talking about like what kind of professional to hire. Obviously, I'm biased in favor of freelancers, but freelancers are really best for new businesses or small businesses with just a few internal stakeholders where it will be like a one-to-one relationship. The pros of hiring a freelancer is they often bring specific expertise in a particular niche. You'll get more direct attention and often like more enthusiasm about your product. You have direct access to the person who's actually doing the work. So you know that the work is being done by the experts who you're hiring, and the process can be more flexible. So if you only need like a small piece right now, you won't have to sign on to this like big process and get stuff that maybe you don't need at this moment. Cons are that there's a limited scope of service offerings. Obviously, they're one person, so you might have to work with multiple people for different deliverables, and there'll be more, that'll be more work on your part to put those pieces together and implement the branding across, you know, all of your different freelancers. And then there are small to mid-size agencies. This is one that my friends own. So who it's best for is businesses who are experiencing rapid growth or businesses who need a lot of different touch points all at once. So if you need to build like your big brand, like that has all of your, you know, social strategy and marketing and just like a bunch of different touch points, it can be helpful to work with an agency because they have a wider range of services and more established experience in all of those different areas because there are just more professionals working there. So cons are the work can sometimes be formulaic and lack specificity. I find that that's because, you know, you're not working one-to-one with someone who's like really passionate about what they're doing. A lot of the time the work will be done by like junior or mid-level designers who just aren't that excited about it. It can be less collaborative and the process is like a little less transparent, and less flexibility means you can end up paying for things that you don't quite need yet, which isn't to disparage these agencies at all. They're really amazing. Like you can't go wrong. Mostly you'll end up paying more to work with them as well. Although part of that is because of the really, you know, extended process and all of the different professionals who are working there. And then I do want to touch on these transactional platforms like Fiverr, which will probably come up if you're searching for, you know, like branding design in my area. So these platforms are where you can pay a low cost for specific deliverables. So you can see, you know, I'll design a logo and social media kit for $250. Like that's pretty crazy. But you know, I do think they have their place. Like if you need a really stopgap short-term solution, if you're like, I have an event that's happening in 2 weeks and I just need something that's like better than what I have right now that looks professional, I think that this is a pretty good option. And then for deliverables that don't really have a very high value for your business, I think it can be fine as well. But really like think about how the value basically of like strategy and creativity and working with someone and not just like someone creating a deliverable for you. Um, the more value you think those things have, the less you'll want to use transactional platforms like this. Finally, here's another quote. The way a company brands itself is everything. It will ultimately decide whether a business survives. So that's it for my presentation. I think we're gonna do some more questions now.
All right, that was awesome, Chloe. Thank you so much. As I mentioned before, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A section or into the chat section. I really appreciate you showing us the thoughtfulness that you can take into executing on your brand strategy, whether you're a brand new brand or whether you're sort of pivoting or revisiting what that looks like as an existing business. You did a great job of sort of showing us both sides of it and offering, you know, solves for both sides of it. And then obviously the tiers of the different services that you can provide. I will say from a business coach perspective, one of the things that we do address when we're looking at projections and we're looking at moving forward with how is your business going to grow? How are we going to be able to engage with you? One of the things that we always touch on is your brand and your marketing. Oftentimes I'll be working with people that have some line item and some arbitrary number attached to that, because I think that we all know as small business owners that branding is super important, and the ability to communicate our brand to our market, whether we are service-based or whether we are product-based, is really, really important. There's a lot of white noise out there, and it's really our opportunity to raise above that and have people notice us, which is kind of important as just to create space. And it shows really well when I'm working with clients that have put some really thoughtful effort into creating their brand. So I'm going to go ahead and be quiet now, and people feel free to pop in with questions, thoughts, either on the Q&A or on the chat.
We need hold music.
I know, right? Maybe that's a new like tertiary app that we can design for Zoom and make a ton of money.
Oh, that would be fun.
Oh, wait, this is being recorded. Don't do that. Don't say that out loud. And if a question doesn't come up, I have questions too. And or if any of the other panelists have thoughts or questions. And I know we have some team members on as well, so feel free to pop in.
I see a little number in the chat bubble, but I can't see the actual chat. So I don't know if there's just comments or if there's
Aldo's been curating it, the Q&A. Okay, so I have one. I'll use a real world example. So when for my brand, I had a friend design a logo who had a graphic design background 5 years ago, and I've just been letting that logo ride for a really long time. I don't particularly like it, and I don't think it's representative of where my brand is now. But a logo is, like you mentioned in the presentation, a logo is kind of a big thing. So how would you work with someone if I was working with you, like yourself, like a freelancer, and came and said, all right, I need to, like, how do I take whatever value I have left over from that logo and build upon that, but really sort of reset what it means to have that logo so that it represents my brand now?
Yeah, so I think a good way to think about that would be building up all of those other parts of the brand so that you're not just putting all of that weight and importance on your logo to do all of that work. So yeah, I mean, your logo is important, but it also is like a very small piece of the bigger puzzle. So having all of those elements can like influence also what your logo will look like and how it will work for you. And yeah, so I would think about like when you're, because you could go to one of those like transactional platforms and be like, hey, make my logo better. And you probably could, you know, get a better logo that way. But it's not going to be something that's like based on the story that you're wanting to tell and that, you know, speaks to your customers. And again, you are really the face behind your business. So curating your like online presence and your social media presence might have more value than the logo itself.
And staying on the logo front, Tina has a great question around what are your opinions around of AI creating a logo and then picking the one you like?
Um, well, I mean, obviously this is like such a huge topic in my industry. And I don't want to just like default to a negative opinion because I'm scared of the threat to the creative industry. All that being said, I do think that like AI at this point generates like a pretty specific look that's becoming like more and more identifiable. Also, as I said about John's logo, like it's not going to be based on all of those other strategy pieces and like actually representing all of those other things. Like the logo is such a small piece of it. So I guess if you really want to do that, and you get something that you're like proud of and happy with, I guess, that's fine. Um, But yeah, I mean, I think you're not, if you think of your logo as like a larger piece of a small piece of like a larger puzzle and like a small piece of like what your branding actually is. If you just have that logo, it's really, you just have like a little piece of the who and your what, and you don't have all of those other pieces. So the logo is not going to really do that much work for you.
That's a great answer. I have two great questions in the Q&A chat right now. Sonia's curious, when you make logo or more really overarching branding changes, should you reach out to your existing customer base to inform them about your new look and your new strategy?
Not unless it's like totally different. I think, or if you're like a legacy brand like Pepsi or something where it's going to be really noticeable. Like if you're rebranding and changing your name and your whole look and like how and your service offering, then like making some kind of announcement, I think is probably helpful and necessary. But if you're making small tweaks or changes, it's unlikely that people will really take a lot of notice. Especially if you're like staying consistent with your like brand story and your strategy. If you're making like visual changes, like changes to your color palette or like tweaking your logo, I would put those in your brand guidelines and make sure to like update all of that so you're still keeping everything consistent moving forward. But no one's paying as close attention to, it's kind of like if you get a haircut, like if you shave your head, then people are really going to notice. Well, I mean, if I shaved my head, people would notice. But if you're just like styling your hair a little differently, you're going to still be like the same person and people aren't going to really have a lot of questions. So, yeah, I would just think about if people really need to know.
So I've got a
And so
question. I've got a question around intellectual property. So how important is it to patent or register your logo? When do we do this? Sonia said, thank you for answering that question. But so this is sort of a big overarching question. I'm gonna jump in before you answer it, and you can kind of yes and this. Patents are very expensive, and they're very, very drawn out, and they require a lot of legal advice, like a patent lawyer. So the patent part, unless it's something that the process or the or whatever it is going to be used on a multiplier by a lot of different companies and you're able to make money off that patent, I would encourage you to go the route of intellectual property rights. But you can expand on that, Chloe. I just wanted to jump in on that part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically right. So I will generally run the logo through like the trademark database that everyone has access to make sure that there's nothing like so close that a search engine would recognize it. And then I will sometimes run it through like a reverse image search. But as the logos get more specific, it becomes like less and less likely that anything is going to come up from that. And trademarking is complicated and expensive. And I think, I mean, I don't want to speak too much on it because I'm not really an expert. But I do know that like if your branding is out there in the world, you will have a claim to challenge someone who's trying to trademark your exact logo. So I don't know. I mean, the advice that I've gotten from trademark attorneys is to not worry about it until, you know, you're like publicly traded or there's like a big risk to someone stealing your brand.
That's great. It's really good insight. So that's all the questions in the chat, or sorry, in the Q&A. It looks like the chat is quiet right now. We've got a couple more minutes if anybody has any like closing thoughts or questions. Could you so reverse Google image search for that brand, right? For that logo. But what's the first thing you said? There's like a branding,
Yeah,
use a branding search or branding engine or something?
there's like, I mean, if you just look up like trademark search, like consumer trademark search, you can search names, and there's like a very basic, like not that great image search, which will really only come up with something if it's like identical. So, you know, but you know, it's good if you're like creating a logo that's like extremely simple and minimalist, it's really hard to come up with an idea that no one has thought of before, honestly. So it's good to make sure that there's nothing out there that's like so close that it could be seen as copying or stealing.
Well, and hopefully that would be like if I was in that phase of my growing my business, that would be part of my market research and competitive market research, right? Because hopefully whatever logo and branding that I'm coming up with is reflective of whatever I'm offering. And so if there's something that's out there that is existing out there, hopefully that's just another opportunity to be like, okay, well, this is what's in the market right now. And these are my competitors. This is my competitive market analysis. And it gives you some fodder to be able to move forward from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it is unlikely if you are basing all of that visual identity on a lot of strategy and research, it's going to be specific to you.
That's great. So we're running out of time. I just wanted to thank Chloe Steinhoff-Smith. I want to thank Aldo. I want to thank Jennifer for all being part of this presentation. Chloe, thank you so much. Her contact information is in the screen below. These will be on our website and on our YouTube channel. Please feel free to reach out to any of us with additional questions or thoughts and feedback. I know Jennifer is going to send some follow-up content about feedback about the workshop, and it's going to help guide us and understand you guys as small business owners and the community that supports small business owners, the direction that you'd like to see these go. So we're always open and excited for any type of input, and keep an eye out for the next ones that are coming up. We're hoping to do a couple more this year and just keep in touch about it. And thank you so much, Chloe, for the time. We really appreciate your expertise.
Will you also send them those documents with the big questions and market research?
I will. I'm going to fill one out myself too.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.